Okay, so Bezras Hashem, we're starting now Gemara Kesubos. Kesubos is the second tractate in the third uh, order of the Mishnah and Gemara of Nashim. So Kesubos discusses a lot of stuff related to the marriage process, not the marriage itself. That's Kedushin, the last tractate in the order, but this is Kesubos, the second one. We don't. So the Kesuva is the word ksuva itself is the name of the marriage document. Well, it's not really it's a document that discusses the obligations that a husband has to his wife, and that we'll learn about that much later in the Masechta. That doesn't start out with that at all, but the ksuva itself is an obligation on the man that it will make him it will slow him down in case he would be very upset or angry and then suddenly decide to divorce his wife. This will, because he'll give himself monetary obligations, it will slow him down to save the marriage, so to speak. Shtar is Hebrew, yeah. I mean, ksuva itself is obviously from the word kasuv, which is written. But I think it's that when a certain type of shtar is used, it got its special name. Like my personal opinion is that the word gabai comes from the word gava-a tzedakah, because legavos esachov means to collect an obligation. So I think they were called gava-a tzedakah, the ones who collected the tzedakah, and somehow it just got shortened to gabai. And the regular term gabai was from the word gabai tzedakah. And now we use it for something else, just like gabai in the shul, just like the word chazan didn't mean the one who is the shliach tzibor. In the Mishnah, it's called shliach tzibor. So sometimes the words, have different connotations. Now, the Rambam counts in Sefer Mitzvos positive obligation to get married with ksuva v'kedushin. So someone should get married with ksuva and kedushin. So we'll learn that if someone decides to get married, but they wouldn't use a ksuva for whatever reason, according to some opinions we'll see, I think on Daf Yud, according to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, the ksuva is d'oraisa, or perhaps the obligation of ksuva is d'oraisa, but there's many specific details that are rabbinic. According to most opinions, though, it's rabbinic. But if you don't get married with kedushin and the ksuva, you violate this positive commandment. So a nafkamina, in my opinion, is if someone would go and get a secular marriage license and become legally married before so obviously before you get married, you have to go to the courthouse to get the license, but it doesn't take effect until the rabbi signs it. But if someone would go and become legally married from the justice of the peace or whatever to the courthouse before their wedding, in my opinion, they're negating that mitzvah. And it's not so uncommon as you think, especially nowadays. Sometimes they get married a little early so that one could get on the other one's insurance.
Yeah, and I've heard more Orthodox people that do it.
I know. I don't think it's right.
But you would admit there's a difference of opinion.
I discussed it with a big posek who didn't see any problem with it.
Yeah.
But from the way the Rambam says it, I don't see that it's a good thing to do.
No. I can't mention names, but I know somebody who.
Okay. Did they ask a rabbi before they did it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, now they can find your rabbi and find your.
Right. I mean, at one time, the couple said, we want to sign this. And I look at it, and I'm like, this isn't a prenup, it's a post-nup. You already got married? So that's how I found out about it. But yeah. So, but let me say for the record, I think that it is an important thing to be legally married also. Don't just get married. I mean, obviously the biggest thing is halacha, but also get the marriage license. The civil marriage license. It's important to have that also. You understand? Well, did they know about Ksuva at the beginning? That's why. Right, you didn't know about it, so that's a different thing, right? So there is a different, I mean, there is a halacha that if a woman would lose her ksuva because it's hers to say, to be able to bring it out in case of need and say, this is owed to me. And so if she would lose it, they would temporarily, one of them should move out of the house until you write a new ksuva called the ksuva de erchasa, which replaces a ksuva, but says they'd been married and they had a ksuva, but it got lost, and now this is the replacement ksuva. That's basically what it is. There were a few times that happened, and different people said I was going to be the one who was going to have to find. It's not that easy to find that text. I mean, on the internet nowadays, it's not as hard, but it's not such a common text that you could find. But I had a couple times where I was said, you're going to have to write this, and then luckily I didn't have to. But that's a case where they had a ksuba that got lost. So one other important note is that this Masechta Kesubos is called Shas Katan because it goes through so many different topics that are related to all areas of the whole Shas. This is called the miniature Shas. So we're going to be seeing, God willing, topics from all over Shas. And we're not going to know Shas when we go through Kesubos, but we'll know topics, many topics that appear in many cases in different, all over Shas. And again, our goal at the beginning, we're going to try to go a little bit faster, but our goal is going to do one daf a week. So we'll keep up with the official Daf Hashavua organization that does a daf a week. Right now, they're on Daf Yud. They're on Yud. They're on 10. They're on 12. I think they're on 10 or 11, but right. So we're going to catch. Okay. Okay. So the Mishnah starts on 2a-1. A virgin gets married on Wednesday, and a widow gets married on Thursday. So see, it's the evening before. The Gemara is going to explain why. Because twice a week, the Batei Din, the rabbinical courts sit in the cities, on Monday and on Friday and on Thursday. So this is one of the 10 enactments that Ezra HaSofer made, and that was in the cities. The Dayanim sat on Monday and Thursday. Now this halacha, or because this also has relation to Purim. Not that Purim is coming up yet because it's not even Hanukkah yet, but in the time of the Mishnah, because people in more rural settings maybe didn't have a minyan or didn't have someone who was capable of leading the tefillah. They used to have Megillah reading for those people when they would come into the cities on Monday and Thursdays. They would read the Megillah the Monday or Thursday before Purim, if Purim didn't fall in on a Monday and Thursday. So some say it's because those were the market days, so they were found there, but a different explanation for that is because they would be able to come into the city if they had some type of dispute and needed to ask the Beis Din something, because the Beis Din was there. So why is this important? Because if the husband married her and she was supposed to be a virgin and she was not, he would go to Beis Din. Now, why would he have to do that? So Rashi's opinion is that Rashi says we're worried that perhaps so what was the process of marriage in those days? In the time of the Mishnah, they would do kedushin or erison. Now, erison was either giving the ring or giving a document, which is not the ksuba. That document would just say you are married to me according to the laws of Moshe and Yisrael, or bia, but that's the first Mishnah of kedushin, and that was part one of the marriage process. They weren't fully married yet. A year later, they would have the chuppah, and there's a lot of different opinions what exactly chuppah is. Obviously, nowadays we have the canopy, and we do everything under the chuppah. But there's really two parts. The first part is giving the ring, which is giving something of monetary value, and then we read the ksuva under the chuppah as an interruption. It used to have 12 months in between the kedushin and the nesuin, but nowadays we read the ksuva to make an interruption, and then after we read the ksuva, then we say the shava brachos, which are part of the nisuin ceremony, and after nisuin, then they're fully married. So Rashi says that we're worried that if after that maybe she committed adultery after after she got the ring, after the erisin, but before the nisuin, because even though they're not fully married, but if she would commit an act of adultery in that time, it would make her an adulteress. So and if so, she wouldn't be allowed to be married with her husband, who is now undertaking her for the chuppah. So that's what Rashi says the problem is. And Tosfos, and so Rashi says, so they have to get married on the Yom Harvi, most likely Tuesday night, so that in case there's a problem, he'll run to Beis Din on Thursday. It'll be fresh in his memory. He'll be upset. He'll run to Beis Din, and there'll be a commotion. So if anyone knows testimony about this, they'll come and testify. So that's what Rashi says. And Tosfos does not like that opinion. For various reasons, Tosfos feels that that's not a problem because okay, so that's how Rashi explains it. So let's start the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Bipnei ma amru bersula nisas yom harvi'i lefi sheshaninu higia zman v'lo nisas ochlos mishalava ochlos betruma. So Rabbi Yosef said the name Rabbi Yehuda and the name of Shmuel. Why did they Chazal say that Basula, the virgin, gets married on Wednesday, which again probably means Tuesday night? It has to do with the following case, because the halacha is if the time for her to have her chuppah, to have the nisuin came, and the husband didn't do that, ochlos mishalov, ochlos betruma. He already has to provide money for food for her, and if he's a kohen, she's allowed to start eating truma. So even though she's not usually allowed to eat truma until the chuppah takes place, until the nisuin takes place, but if she was waiting for the year and the husband didn't bring her to the chuppah, his obligations of supporting her financially already kick in. So the question is, you might think that, let's say the year was on a Sunday, so maybe exactly 12 months to the day is when he's obligated. So the Gemara says no. That as long as he marries her that week, so the standard time to get married would be that Tuesday night. So even if the 12 months would have been up a day or two or three before, it's not a problem. He's fulfilling his obligation of marrying her on time if he marries her on the Wednesday. Rav Yosef Merei de Avraham. So Rav Yosef says, Master of Abraham. So it's like an expression of like Ribbona Shalom. What are you talking about? Tali Tanya, Badalo Tanya? Are you making a halacha in the Mishnah based on something that the Mishnah doesn't even say? So the Gemara says, well, hi Tanya, hi lo Tanya. What is the thing that's said, and what's the thing that isn't said? Hatanya v'hatanya. This halacha about being married on Tuesday night is mentioned, and we also have a brisa about if they wasn't married by 12 months, the husband who hasn't done the chuppah yet is already obligated to provide her with food. So Ella Tali Tanya de Mefarish Taima, but Tanya de Lo Mefarish Taima. So the question against this opinion is that they're applying brisa or a Mishnah's din that has an explicit reason on a court based on a different teaching whose reason was not explicit. So if you wanted to say what the answer that Rav Yosef Amar Yehuda Amar Shmuel was saying, This is the way you should say it. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Why did they say that a virgin gets married on Wednesday or on Tuesday night? So if she ended up not being a virgin, he would run the next day to Beis Din. So again, we'll see if Wednesday here means Wednesday night or only Tuesday night. But Wednesday night, at least for us, we know that the weddings go late, so they're not exactly waking up early the next morning. Even someone at our minyan, who usually at 6 o'clock minyan, he had a family member get married, and he was not at 6 o'clock minyan the next morning. So I'm not being critical, but we know it goes very late.
We're old guys now, then. 10, 11 o'clock is late at night for us. Not like you.
So he'd get up to Basin. So then if you want to ask, let them get married on Sunday. So I knew say, so we could go to Beis Din on Monday morning. The Beis Din meets twice a week, not only once a week. So if that's the reason that they should go to Beis Din is that the husband should go to Beis Din in case there's a problem, there's 2 days during the week that he can go to Beis Din. So let him do that. So the Gemara says, "Shaktu chachamim al takanos b'nei Yisrael sheyehei terech b'suda shlosha yamin." The chachamim were dedicated to giving the Jewish girls, the Jewish young women, the proper respect, and that they had to work for 3 days. That the husband had to that the husband would provide for, because it seems that unlike today, it seems the husband was the one involved in doing most of the food. That they would spend 3 days preparing for the wedding, and so if you get married on Sunday, they wouldn't have 3 days to prepare because of Shabbos. They wouldn't have 3 days to prepare for a nice wedding for her. So they could work all day on Sunday and Monday and Tuesday, or and on Wednesday, they would get married. But now that we learned that the Chachamim were dedicated to having the respect, the honor, and the dignity of the Jewish young women kept, that the meal, they had to have 3 days of preparing for the meal. The halacha that we know, that if the time had arrived for the 12 months have come up, and now it's time for the husband to bring her to the chuppah, and he didn't do chuppah, she's allowed to, she eats from his money, and if he's a Kohen, she's allowed to eat truma, which again, you're only allowed to eat a truma if you're Kohen, but if you're a slave to a Kohen, which obviously is not what we're talking about here, you could eat truma. And if you're a spouse of a Kohen, a wife of a Kohen, I should say, a wife of a male Kohen, you could eat truma. So even though she didn't fully become his wife yet, but because the 12 months are up, she's allowed to eat truma. So higiyazman be'achad b'Shabbos mitoch she'niyachal lichnos eino ma'ila lemizonos. But if the 12 months was up on a Sunday or a Monday or a Tuesday, also I guess, since the Chachamim said in such a case you have to wait, you have to spend 3 days preparing the feast for the wedding. If the 12 months ended on Monday or Tuesday, Sunday or Monday, we don't say that the husband has to support her yet, because he has this extra couple days in order that he will comply, or because he has to comply with this other enactment of the sages. So it's not a problem that he didn't do chuppah with her exactly by the 12 months time. Does that make sense? So basically, because of this takana, this enactment that the Chachamim say, they have to, in order out of respect that the girl gets a respectable wedding feast, they have to spend 3 whole days consecutive preparing for it. So therefore, if her time, the 12 months were up, but it was Monday or Sunday or Monday, or possibly a Tuesday, because the husband had to comply with this other takanas chazal, they said that if the 12 months are up, she has to wait another day or two until it's Yom Harvi, until it's Wednesday, for the chuppah, and it's not, and we're not punishing the husband for not having brought her to the chuppah 2 or 3 days earlier. Lafika, based on this halacha, if he became sick or she became sick, shapirsa nida, or if she became a nida, she saw menstrual bleeding, so that she's tmeya, she's ritually impure, and would have to separate from her husband once she's married. So before the wedding, it's a problem. Also, in those cases, he doesn't have to pay for her food, because when there's a reason, a justifiable reason that postpones this 12-month time period, the husband is not penalized, or in the case of her getting sick, he's not forced to do something even though it was beyond his control. So obviously if she got sick, it's beyond his control, but even if he got sick, it's beyond his control. So he's not forced to start supporting her before the chuppah. Okay, now we're on 2a-3. But some asked this as a question. What's the halacha if he becomes sick? Is he still is he on the hook to pay for her food or not? Hasam taimamai, because there, what was the halacha mishum da'anis? If he was ready to take her to the chuppah and the 12 months ended on a Sunday or a Monday, but there was an unavoidable conflict. The onus was that the Chachamim said you have to work for 3 days. Excuse me. You have to not work, but you have to. In that case. But here, when he became sick, okay, it's unavoidable to him, so we can say that he's not on the hook to support her financially. Or there, because the Chachamim made an enactment, the fact that because the Chacham made the enactment that you have to spend 3 days preparing for the wedding feast, so that's the reason why the Chachamim say, okay, if it falls out on Sunday or Monday, we'll let you off the hook for a couple of days. But they didn't give him a get out of jail free, lahavda, shouldn't use that expression here, but they wouldn't exempt him from having to pay for her financial support if he got sick. Maybe not. And if you want to say that if he got sick, he does have to start supporting her with food. But if she got sick, what's halacha? I'm here ready to do the chuppah, and therefore it's not my fault. So I shouldn't be on the hook because it's not my fault. Or is she able to say your field got flooded? So meaning sometimes there's a halacha, or the case that it's talking about is that sometimes your field got flooded. So she might say, you just had bad luck. You're right. You didn't do anything wrong, but sometimes you have bad luck, and in this case, you're just out of luck, and you have to pay for my food, even though I'm not necessarily, even though it's not your fault. Sometimes you have bad luck. That's the way Rashi explains this expression. And even if we say yes, she's able to say, you have bad luck and you have to start paying for my food, even though it's not your fault. Pirsa nida mahu. But what if the case where she becomes a nida, she starts seeing blood? So now the Gemara interrupts to say exactly what we're asking about this. So a woman becomes a nida, there's 2 halachas of when she sees blood. One, so if she sees the blood in a normal cycle, we call it a vesas. The regular time where she sees blood, and if she sees blood at a time where she's not normally supposed to see blood, it's possible that she would have the din of azava. Zav or zava means flow, and that's also in Parshas Tazria. So the halacha is midiraisa that if she sees blood for 1 day or 2 days, she would have to keep 1 or 2 days without blood. But if she sees blood for 3 days, then she has a high level of tuma, and she has to count 7 clean days. And but for Anita, if it's the regular blood at the regular time, midiraisa, I can't remember this right now. Midiraisa, I might be wrong about this. I don't remember. Midiraisa might just be as long as she's bleeding, she's tmei, and then she goes to mikvah, she's okay. And then Rabbi made a takana, Rabbi Yehuda Anasi made a takana besados that she counts 7 days from the beginning of the bleeding, and then after that she can go to the mikvah. And then Reb Zera says that the women themselves, the Jewish women themselves, made a stringency on themselves that whenever they see blood, they always count 7 clean days. So they have to make sure that they're blood free for 7 days before they go to the mikvah. So nowadays, there's not really a difference if it was in regard to what the halacha is based because of this, the minhag b'nos Yisrael. It doesn't matter when she sees blood, but on a d'oraisa level, it does depend what. And I should point out, actually, the Rambam has a very unique shita that no one agrees with. But according to the Rambam, Rambam's opinion, which I can't find right now, is that depending on when she first had her first period of her life, she starts counting cycles, and if the blood comes, 21-day cycles? I think she counts cycles of 7 days and then 14 days, 7 days, 14 days, 7 days, 14 days. So if she sees blood during the 7 days, it's considered nida blood. And if it comes out during the 14th day, it's menstrual blood. If she would have a baby, and then after she would, her cycle would start coming again, that would reset her biological clock, so to speak, and had count the 7-14, 7-14. So that's the Rambam's opinion. So we actually would know what type of blood she has, but we don't pass them like the Rambam, and I don't think any other Rishonim pass them like the Rambam. And but when we talk about Bishas Vesta, is it the time when we expect her to have her period? So the Gemara is saying if she became a nida and it was the time that she was expected to have a nida, there's no question. She doesn't have to say you had bad luck. This is the way that my body is. So you should have done it a couple weeks earlier or a week earlier, so you wouldn't have run into this problem, and you would have to, and the husband would have to provide for her food, even though they didn't have chuppah yet. But kiti ba'ilach, when the question is shalabashas festa, what happens if she became tmea, she saw blood, and it wasn't during the time that she was supposed to? What's the halacha? Kevin delabashas vesta havia. Since it's not at the time that she was supposed to see blood, is she able to tell him you had bad luck? We're on 2b now. Is she allowed to say you had bad luck, so you still have to pay for my food? Or since there are women whose cycles change, we could are we to assume that the fact that she still had blood when she wasn't, that's just part of her body changing, and so it's not bad luck for him, and he doesn't have to pay for her. So there's 3 different cases. One is, what if he got sick? Second case, what if she got sick? And the third case, what if she became a nida? And then within the question of nida, do we do we differentiate between it being at the time when she expects to see blood, or in which case he should have planned, or sometimes women's cycles change, and in which case he maybe would. It's not his fault to have, or it wasn't upon him to have to worry about that. So the fact that he can't marry her right now is something that it's beyond his control and her control, and therefore he's not obligated to start paying for her food, even though the 12 months are out. So Pashat Rav Achai. So Rav Achai answered this question. Higias man of Loniso, if the 12 months came up and he didn't bring her to the chuppah, ochos mishlov, ochos betruma, she's allowed to eat from, or he has to provide the money for her food, and if he's a Kohen, she's allowed to eat truma. Lona so loktani. It doesn't say. So meaning, what's the word? The word is niso. It seems it's lo nasu loktani. It doesn't say they didn't marry. It says ela lo niso. They were not married. So that makes it sound like it's not limited to the husband, because in the Hebrew grammar, naso, it's based on him. Niso is more of a passive thing. They were not married. It's not that he didn't marry her. If it would have said lo naso without a yod, he didn't marry her, so it's his fault. But no, it says lo niso, they were not married. So even if it's not his fault and the marriage didn't happen, he is still on the hook. So hey chidami. So what does the brisa mean when it says lo niso? They weren't married. If amai ochlos mishlava ochlos betruma. If they were pushing it off, why is she able to eat? Why is he obligated to pay for her food? The itnis ki hagavna. Rather, it must be a case of an anos. It was an unavoidable delay, like we said. Either he got sick or she got sick, or she became a need of a katani. Ochos mishlov, ochos betruma. Yet the Mishnah there says that the husband has to provide food for the wife, and if he's a kohen, she's allowed to eat truma. So Rabbi Choy tried to answer from the fact that it said Niso, they weren't married. So even when it's not his fault, he's on the hook for paying for her food. Ravashi. Ravashi gives a different answer. Liolam emalach kol onso lo achla. Really, I would tell you that when it's an ones, an unavoidable delay, whether it's his fault or her fault, she's not allowed. He does not have. So lo achla means she doesn't eat. But what it means is that she doesn't eat from his food, meaning he's not obligated to pay for her food. Or if he's a kohen, she's allowed to eat truma. It doesn't necessarily have to be his truma. If any kohen, meaning if any kohen would give to any other kohen truma, the other kohen's allowed to eat it. So it's not like she literally would have to eat from her husband's truma, but once she would be considered married or the time is up, the time is up for him to have brought her to the chuppah, she can go to a marketplace and buy truma food for whatever reasons. In time of the Gemara, I think we mentioned this a couple weeks ago, truma food was cheaper in the market. I guess there was a steady supply, but because there weren't so many kohanim, the demand was lower, or maybe kohanim didn't want to have to worry about staying tahor to eat it. So because of that kept the demand even lower. So it was cheaper to buy truma. That would be a reason why she would want to buy truma. But in a case when the man was pushing off the wedding, and really the Tana should have said lo naso, they didn't get married. The husbands didn't get married, they were penalized. Va'adi the Tana Reisha bedid he, but since at the beginning the Mishnah talked about her, Kananami Seifa bedid he. The Seifa also said with her. So meaning there Rav Ashi tried to say that if the time to get married happened and they were not married, he still has to support her. So Rav Ashi is saying, no, you can't try to learn it from that Mishnah, because the Mishnah began talking about a case of her. So once we started talking from her perspective, they made the last case to talk about what if the 12 months came and they didn't get married. They weren't married. So it makes it sound like it's on her, even though the halacha was really on him. It really was on the husband, but it was written in a way to only sound like it's talking about the wife, because the first half of the Mishnah was only talking about a wife. So he used an imprecise term just to keep to not switch subjects from the women's side to the man's side. But really, Rav Achoy is not correct in reading. I mean, he's correct in noticing that verb is not the verb that it should be. But there was a reason that the Tana worded it in that way, so we're not allowed to make the deal that Rav Achoy made from it. Okay, now we're at the two dots, about a third of the way down. Amar Rava. Rava says, well, when you get an enokain, but this halacha is not true in regard to gittin. So Alma. So we're saying is that even though for Kedushin, we're saying he can claim, I wanted to get married, but something else held me up, so he's not obligated. But what if he made a divorce on some type of condition, and he was held up against his will and not able to fulfill the Tanai, and he really doesn't want to get married? I mean, he doesn't want to get divorced. We don't say that the onus stops the get from taking effect. So we'll see some cases to clarify what we're talking about. But we're saying that even though this we would say that's ones when he got sick or she got sick, it takes him off the hook, but it's not going to work the same way for gittin. So it sounds like Rava holds that there is no claim of unavoidable ones, an unavoidable situation happen in regard to a get. So Manale Rava. So what is Rava's source for this? If it's from the following Mishnah, if he gave her a get, but on the condition, this is your get if I don't come from now until 12 months from now. So meaning if he would come within the 12 months, so then the get would take effect. But what happened? He died after 4 months and he hadn't come yet. So maybe he was planning to come in the 5th month or in the 8th month, but because he's dead, he can't come. So the Gemara says, "Ain't no get." It does not act as a divorce document. Now what's the nafkamina? What's the difference in then if it's a get or not? I mean, she's not married to him anymore either way, right? But here's the difference. If she was widowed from, well, there'd be at least two differences. One is, would she have the status of a widow or a status of a divorcee? If the get would take effect, she's considered a divorcee, and she wouldn't be allowed to marry a Kohen, because a Kohen's not allowed to marry a Grusha, divorcee. But if the get didn't take effect and now she's considered a widow, she would be allowed to marry a Kohen. That's one difference in the halacha of whether the get took effect or not. A second one is let's say they didn't have children. So in those days, if there was no children, they had to do yibum. His brother would have to marry her, or they would do the chalitza ceremony. And in order to not have to worry about the yibum or chalitza ceremony, nowadays we only do chalitza. Rav Ovadia Yosef said it was Sephardic custom up until his time was to do yibum, and so we should still do yibum. And he feels Ashkenazim are wrong, and they should also do yibum. But we don't paskin that way. But Rav Ovadia Yosef paskin that way. So, but I think in the beginning of the state of Israel, there were certain significant halachic differences between Ashkenazim and Sephardim, and this was one. And the chief rabbinate, whoever was at the time, decided we're only going to do chalitza. And so Rabbi Ovadia Yosef wasn't exactly, he was still in Egypt at that time, but he was very much opposed to other people telling the Sephardim that they should change their minhag about that. So in order to spare her from having to do Yibum or Chalitza, he'd rather divorce her, and so she wouldn't have to do Yibum or Chalitza. So I might think Meitzu de'eno get. If he dies, it's not a get. Hachala harez a get. But if he got sick, it's a get. So let's say he wanted to come, but he was very sick, and so he wasn't well enough to travel back into this city to make an appearance and to cancel out the condition of the get. But that's not true. He's holding that even if he got sick and it's an onus, it was beyond his control that he couldn't come to fulfill the Tanai, but he wanted to. Maybe it really would be get. Maybe we can't use that brisa or that mishnah to prove Rava's point that there's no coercion, or excuse me, there's no ones, there's no claim of I was unavoidably detained and it's not my fault to cancel out and the Tanai shouldn't be this condition that upon which the get was given shouldn't have become fulfilled because I wanted to break it, I wanted to come back. So maybe even if he got sick, that's not a get either. But the reason that this halacha was talking the case he died was to show that you can't have a get after the husband dies. The get has to be when the husband's still alive. So maybe ones does apply, but the halacha was worded only in the case of death, not to exclude the case of being sick, but in order to teach us halacha that the get can't come from a dead person. Even obviously he wrote it beforehand, but it doesn't take effect till after he dies. So you can't. So the Gemara rejects that. No, you Hatana Laresha. The beginning of that brisa said the following: Hareze gitechi mesi, hareze gitech micholizeh, hareze gitech la'achar misa lo amar klom. This is your get if I die, or this is your get if I die from this illness. And again, the purpose for that is usually they gave a get so the wife wouldn't have to do yibum or chalitza. Or this is your get after I die, lo amar klum. He didn't say anything. These are not, you're not allowed to make a condition like this for a get. So the Mishnah already told us that you can't give a get after you die. So therefore, when it says, this is your get after 12 months, and if he dies, it's not a get, it can't be coming to teach us the halacha that you can't give a get after you died, because the Reisha gave 3 examples where it happened. So the interpretation should be that Rava learned from this halacha that if you got sick and couldn't fulfill your Tanai of coming back to the city because you were sick, it doesn't count, and therefore the get does take effect. So Dilma lafukim de Rabboseinu. Maybe the text of this this Mishnah was coming to argue on the halacha of Rabboseinu. The Tana Kazunta Nabraisa Rabboseinu hitiruli nase. The Rabboseinu allowed her to get married. Meaning, if he said, if I don't come back, and he didn't come back, but because he was sick, the Rabboseinu allowed her to get married and not need a yibum or chalitza. So Varminan man Rabboseinu, and we said, who was the opinion? Who's Rabboseinu in this Mishnah? Am Rabbi Yehuda Mar Shmuel Beidina Desharu Mishcha. It was the basin that allowed oil. So what does it mean? The halacha that allowed oil. There was a decree that you couldn't use. So we know that we're not allowed to use wine of a non-Jew. So even wine, so definitely wine that was poured for their avodah zarah service is certainly you're not allowed to take. But we say even you're not allowed to again, you shouldn't even bread from a non-Jew or wine from a non-Jew, because if you become too friendly with them, you might start setting up his son with your daughter, or it's an intermarriage. So there was a time that you weren't even allowed to buy oil from a non-Jew, even though the oil in those times wasn't, you didn't eat the oil that was used as lotions, we mentioned many times, but still, so if you would buy oil from them, they at a certain time the Chachamim felt that was going to be a cause for intermarriage. But then at Rabbeinu, at some point they felt that there wasn't a problem anymore, so you're allowed to buy oil from a non-Jews. So Sabri like Rabbi Yossi, so those Rabbeinu held like Rabbi Yossi, the Amar Zmanu Shel Shtar Merchiach Halav. So they say that because we have to have a date on a get and any contract, so the time of the get shows when it happened. So Rabbi Seinu said this get works even though the husband was dead by the time the 12 months were up, but the time written on the shtar he was still alive. So they say in that case we say that the get does take effect and she's considered divorced. So this is going to get right now. This Gemara we've been talking about is pretty technical and not so exciting. It's going to change, but it's not the simplest, most straightforward Gemara. So what's the source for Rava that there's no? Oh, so we're saying is that so we wanted to say what's Rava's source that there's no coercion, that there's no, you can't make the claim of ones. The husband says, I tried to fulfill my t'nai so that the get would become nullified, but something held me back. I want to stay married to her. So this first brisa that we tried to prove ends up we can't prove it from there. So now we say the elami seifa. So he tries to, his source is the end of that brisa, or the end of that Mishnah, which says me'achshav im labasim mikan be'ad shnei masar chodesh u'meitz b'shoch shnei masar chodesh harei ze get. So there is a important halacha. Halacha allows things to happen retroactively. So if you make a claim, this is your get if you do 100 push-ups. So if she does 100 push-ups, so then it becomes a get. But then there's another way of saying it. You say, this is your get from now, me'achshav, if you do 100 push-ups. So if she does 100 push-ups, it makes the get having taken effect retroactively from the time of him giving the get. So a couple possible nafkaminas. What if she started having a relationship with another person in the meantime? So she hadn't done the 100 push-ups yet, but if it becomes retroactively, she was divorced beforehand, then it ends up that when she started this relationship with the other guy, she wasn't married to the first guy anymore. Or a similar but a little bit less extreme case maybe is before she did the 100 push-ups, someone gave her a ring and said, Hareza, did Kedushin with her. So if she's married, she can't become married to a second person. It had no effect. But if it happens retroactively, later looking back, we're saying she was divorced already at the time, so she was able to accept the Kedushin from someone else. So the word me'achshav makes the get take effect retroactively once the t'nai, once the condition became fulfilled. So what happens if he says, I'm divorcing you from now if I don't come back in 12 months, and then he died within the 12 months? It is a valid get. So so the Gemara says whether he died or even if he fell sick and wasn't able to come back to this city, so she becomes divorced. So we see Enos Gittin. So the Gemara says, so basically it's the first time in the Gemara when we had this a brisa that says that he died. The Gemara says died is when it's true, but if he got sick, it's not true. Here the Gemara is trying to take the opposite way because that's what will prove a case, whether he died or whether he got sick. And the Gemara says no. Dilma meis dafka. Maybe this halacha is only true if he died in the 12 months. So the people come yiba. because the whole reason that he made such a tanai, such a condition on the get, was he wouldn't have to. She didn't want her to have to undergo yibum or chalitza in case he died. So it's the case where he didn't die, he didn't want the get to take effect. So elameha. So when we try, so that is a good refutation. You're not able to prove that Rava's source was that brisa. So or that Mishnah elameha. The source of Rava is the following teaching: Tahu the Amar lahu, ilo asinim nikan ve'atlosin yamen lahavi gita. So he made a condition again. He says, if I don't come back from now until 30 days, this is going to be your get. Also, b'sof tlosin yomen, he came back at the 30 days. Upaske mibara, but something happened with the river, and he wasn't able to get a boat to cross the river. Amar lahu, he said to them, chazud asoi, see that I came. I don't want the get to take effect. Amar Shmuel, but Shmuel said, Lav Shmei Masya. It's not coming, even though we know that he's there and he wants to come. He didn't actually come. We see that he's on the other side of the river, but the river is the boundary of the city, and he's not in here, so the get takes effect. And that's a case of onus. Of onus. He wanted to come. We see he's here. He informs us he's here, but because he couldn't, because the weather was a raging flood, and so the boats couldn't cross it, or because there were no boats to be found. And no Uber app at the time. So it doesn't matter, even though he wanted to, when we know he wanted to. In this case, there's no way around it. We know that he wanted to. We see that you cannot use the claim of onus in a case of get. So then the Gemara says, no, v'dilma onsa d'shchech shiny. Maybe a common onus is not a good onus, but a really unavoidable, unusual one isn't okay. The cave and the boile last new asni. He should have known to know that maybe the boat wasn't available to take him across. Ihu de ifsid. That's he loses out, but he didn't expect, let's say, to get a broken leg. Broken legs are much more common than the boat not being there to take you across the river. So maybe in the case of a real onus, even Shmuel would agree that we would apply onus to a case of gittin. So Ella Rava Svar den Afshei Kamar. So we can't find a brisa to support Rava. So Rava says his own logical opinion about this. He said this mishum tnuos mishum prutzos, because of extra modest women and because of women of not such good moral behavior. What's the halacha? Mishum tnuos. The reason for the super modest ribbon, the amart lo lahavi get, if you'd say that really it's not a get. In this case, now we're turning the page to Gimel Amud Aleph. Zimnin lo anis. Maybe there was no ones, but savruah da anis, and she thought that he did experience an unavoidable, unusual situation which stopped him from coming. Agna biyasva, and she's going to make herself into a iguna and just sit and never get married. So in order that these snuos shouldn't be stuck in limbo, never being able to get married because they never see the husband again, and they thought that it was an honest that he didn't come, but it wasn't. He says, "Ein honest begitin." Umishum prutzos. So what about the case of the opposite case, the women who are not of high modesty? The amart lola havi gita. If we say that it's not a kosher get, zimnin da honest, there's a time when there's a real honest, a very unusual thing. He got suddenly very sick and he couldn't come, in an unusual sickness for Amri la honest. But she's saying he didn't have an honest. He decided not to come, and the get is really good. The condition was fulfilled. And then she got married. But really the get was nullified because he was an ones, and because she got married without a kosher get, her kids are going to be mamzerim because she really wasn't divorced. So because in order that these cases shouldn't happen, in one case, a woman who's allowed to get married is going to stay stuck forever. In the other case, a woman who really is married is going to use the excuse that an onus happened and claim that she's married and instead get married shalokidin and have children who are mamzerim. Therefore, the chachamim say for onus, we don't want any of this to happen. So we're just going to say ein onus begin. We can never use the claim of onus for a get. even though theoretically the halacha of onus should apply to a get, in order because of these situations that problems are going to happen, we're going to say we don't apply onus. So then the Gemara asks an obvious question: is it possible that in a case that midiraisa, the condition that he made is a good condition, and the reason that the guy couldn't come back was because an onus, an unavoidable, unforeseeable thing happened, and really the get shouldn't be effect. So let's say in the case of the tnuos, really she was divorced, but she was worried that she wasn't, so she stayed, so she pretended she was married. But we're going to say that really in a case where she really was married, we're going to let her get remarried. On a Torah level, she's still married. And according to the Chachamim are saying, according to what Rabbi is saying here, really, we're not saying onus at all. So she's considered divorced. So they're going to let a married woman, midiraisa, get married, even though she never had a kosher divorce. So the Gemara says, whoever gets married according to the opinion and the ideas that the Rabbanan say, and in those cases, the Rabbanan uprooted the kedushin. So we say when we give the ring, you are betrothed to me with this ring according to the laws of Moshe Yisrael. So part of that, you don't have to explain it this way, but Kedas Moshe Yisrael could mean according to the law of Moshe and Yisrael, according to the Torah law, and according to all the Chachamim who follow Moshe Rabbeinu, whether they were Sanhedrin Agadol or not, according to the 40 generations that the Rambam lists in his introduction. So the Chachamim said in that case, in certain cases, he never married her in the first place. So we're not saying that the get is good, but the Chachamim are saying she was never married in the first place. So we're allowing her to get remarried, not because of a get, but because they're saying she was never married the first time. Amarle Ravina Ravashi, Ravina said to Ravashi, Tinach Kiddush B'Kaspa. This is understanding if they got married with money. So the simplest explanation for this, but it is a big machlokas rishonim, is that this would make sense if they got married with a ring or with money. He gave her money. Because why? We know there's a halacha hefker based in hefker. Hefker, the beis din is allowed to say that money is not your money. We declared ownerless. So if he married her originally with Nesuin, with Erison, with a ring or with money, Chachamim say it wasn't his money at the time. So therefore, they were really married. But Kedesh Babia Ma'ikal Meimar. What if they got married through having marital relations? They can't take that money away. There's no money. So we're on 3a-2. So Shavi Rabbanan Libilaso Bilas Nos. The Chachamim said that what he did there was not for the purpose of marriage. It was for the purpose of an out of marriage relationship. So the marriage never took place to begin with. And you have to say the same thing you don't have to. What about the Gemara? We know that there's a third type of shtar. It doesn't say if he got married with a shtar. So you could either say that you don't have the shtar could go either way. You could say that any relationship he had, if he was mekadesh or a shtar, is bilaznos, or you could say the paper that he wrote it on wasn't his. The Chachamim, the hefker declared it ownerless, and so he didn't write it on his own paper. So that ruins the validity of that kedusha shtar. Okay, so now quickly, the Gemara is going to have another version of what we just said, so we'll go through this quickly and then end. We're on 3a-2. Ika da Amri, some said that the whole sugya about forcing, if there's a force, an onus, a get works, was a different discussion from a different angle. Amar Rabba says, the same thing applies for getting, that we do apply get. So Amaksav Rava Yeshonis Begitin. So let's say that Rava holds that you could use the condition you could make a claim of ones in Gittin and it works. Mesave, but they asked it from the following Mishnah. So meaning originally the Gemara, we're taking the opposite view. The first the Gemara felt that Rava holds there is no coercion. Now we're saying that Rava holds there is coercion. I'm using the word coercion, but ones is you can make a claim of there was something unavoidable happen. Now we're saying Rabbi holds to make the claim of something unavoidable happen does apply for Gittin. Meisbei. So we asked from the Brisa or from the Mishnah. This is your get if I don't come back within 12 months. But what? And if he died, it's not a get. Meisude no get. So now we're inferring from the Mishnah. If he dies, it's not a get. Hachala raise a get. If he got sick, it is a get. So we see that there's no onus. So So no, we'll interpret the Mishnah that even if he got sick, it's also not a get. But he gufa kamashmalan, and the Mishnah is worded in this case to teach us the ain't get la'achar misa. There's no get after death, but ain't get la'achar misa hatani le'reisha. We know that from the first part of the Mishnah, because the first part of the Mishnah says this is a get if I die from this illness, or this is a get after if I die. That's not a get. So we already teaches us that. So the Gemara says, maybe it's to exclude the opinion of Rabosenu. We already learned, held that of Rabosenu, who we saw before. And they said because there's a date on the get, we know that the get could take effect because they're saying it took effect while he was alive because of the date. Tashma, but maybe we can disprove Rava and say that if Rava says that there is coercion from a get, we'll say that there is no coercion from a get. I'm giving you a get from now, so it's going to work retroactively. It'll be your get from this moment. If I don't come within the next 12 months, raise a get, and he died within 12 months, it is a get. My love, who had been lachala. Maybe it's also if he got sick, it's still a get. So we see that we're not allowed to apply, that we don't apply the claim of onus. And Rabbi says you do. So lo, Meis Dafka. No, he learns that only if he died. But the lo nichale ditapalit kameyava. He doesn't want her to do yibam. But if he's still alive, he doesn't want the get to take effect. So we don't apply the claim of onus. Tashma. We try to bring it from a third proof. Me'ahuda amar lahu. Ilo asinu mikabel shoshim yom lahabigita. Also b'sof tosin yomen upaske mavra v'amar lahu chazu da'asya lo shmei masya. So there was a case where the guy says, this is a get if I don't come back within 30 days. He came on the 30th day. We see him on the other side of the river, and he says, I'm here, but the boats can't, there's no boat to take him across. Shmuel says he's not here, takes effect. So we see that we do not apply the claim of onus. So we answer, onus is shchicha shani. No, a common onus, we wouldn't apply. The Kevin the boy he should have been ready for maybe that would come. He should have come earlier that there would be a boat below asne. Or actually, he should have made a t'nai. If I'm there and you see that I'm coming, it should be good. I don't have to actually come, but if you see I'm trying to come, and we know sometimes the boats there's no boat to cross, it's as if I came. Because he didn't word it that way, we don't put those words into his mouth. But something that was truly unavoidable that he wouldn't have thought to make a certain stipulation, we don't make such a stipulation for him. So he caused the loss for himself. So we'll leave it here.